wanted to start with a stat. I actually just heard this stat yesterday from the National Women in Retail um, session and conference that they just had out in California. I'm sorry, actually, it was in Amelia Island, is where it was. And so they said that over the next 2 years, households will spend 49% less due to our current economic conditions. And so, for some individuals, this topic could be seen as sensitive, but we want to let you know that selling your business isn't giving up. That's not what this is about, but it's about moving forward and making sure you have the right parameters in place to move forward when that time dictates that it needs to be. I am going to share that this is for educational purposes only. Of course, we do have a business advisor, licensed, certified, that is going to be sharing information. We're going to share her contact information, and please feel free to follow up with her with any specific questions that you may have. She is top in her industry. All right. Now, if we can get the slides up, there is a question that I would like to ask.
Hold on, Renee. I'm so sorry because okay,
Okay, because I'm like, I'm not seeing them on my end. Is
no, I
anybody else
am,
seeing them?
no. It's me. I'm just trying to text someone needs the actual.
Oh, okay, okay. Hey, Lisa. Well, I'll just say hey to Lisa. I'll say hey to Anna. Lisa, I was just sharing. I heard a stat that came out of the Women in Retail conference that they just had in St. Augustine about a couple of weeks ago. And they shared that households, due to the current economic conditions, will spend 49% less. 49% less. Households are putting money aside, they're saving, they're not making big purchases. And so, as business owners, because with small business owners, we are the economic engine of our nation,
Mm.
we have to give credence to the fact that there is going to be a reduction in spending across the board, across industries. And even though there are some like healthcare that can be recession proof or whatever the case may be. It's something that we've got to think about. And so selling your business isn't about giving up, it's about moving forward. And so I wanted to, of course, share that this is DPI. We are a professional business consulting firm and we focus on leadership development and strategy. We are your trusted advisors to improve profits. And this is what we want you to think about. This is our icebreaker question this morning. How old, and you don't have to share in the chat. Normally we're like, put it in the chat, but you don't have to put it in the chat. How old will you be in 5 years? I want you to also think about how old will your kids be in 5 years? And we're going to tell you why you need to think about that. Now, Rosalind and I don't have any problems whatsoever sharing our age. We're 51 years old. So in 5 years, we're going to be 56. I'll have like a 27-year-old and a 21-year-old. And the reason why we wanted you thinking about that question is because a lot of time when you're charting or thinking about the next phase of your business and moving forward, not giving up, but selling your business, moving it forward, it's about a 3 to 5 year window. And so when you think about, man, Rosin and I will be closer to 60, closer to what the traditional retirement age is. Now is the time to start thinking about all of those things together. Many entrepreneurs hesitate to sell because their business feels like it's a part of them. We've given birth to our businesses, but selling again is not about letting go. It's about securing what you've built and creating new opportunities for yourself along with your employees. So important. So, a business broker helps you to find the right buyer, maximize your value, and ensure a smooth transition. So, if selling has ever crossed your mind, and even if it hasn't, this is what we're going to talk about so that you can move into that next phase of your business with confidence. And so, Rosin, I'm going to turn it over to you to share just a little bit of inspiration about our meeting.
Yeah, so this meeting out and it'll be almost part introduction, and I know Renee's going to read Terry's bio. But I was with a client. I'm not going to say who it was. I was talking with one of our clients because of confidentiality, and this gentleman told me about his desire to want to move to another country and sell his business. And when Renee and I look at our data, the average business owner that we have as clients has been in business 11 years or more. And Renee and I, as we're meeting with the team, we're always thinking about what is the next thing that our business owners might be wanting. And so that conversation with our client just really resonated within me. And I just couldn't stop thinking about it. I just kept ruminating over it. And then Terry, who is going to be speaking with us today, I met her at an SBDC conference. And I remember at this SBDC conference that was in Jacksonville, I was just captivated, one by her jacket, because I'm a big fashion person and she just had this amazing jacket on and it's part of her signature look. But also as she was providing information about how you build value in your business. And I thought, wow, no one's really having this conversation. This conversation is not just about only selling your business. If someone was to come to you today, right now, and want to buy your business, what value price would you put on it? What do you need to know to be ready to sell that business confidently? It's also about if you have the means and the capital investment to want to acquire another business. How will you acquire that business? Some business owners might not want to build from the ground up like we all have on this call. You might decide, I want to become, grow and scale my business through acquisition. And I think having one person that has that intelligence, is an expert leader, is so important to have within your network. So, Renee, I know that was the whole inspiration for this call. Renee, I know that you're going to read Terry's bio. It doesn't do her justice. I am the biggest Terry cheerleader. But Renee, for all
Yes.
intents and purposes, you read her bio.
Okay. And while you bring up the slides, Terry Stallworth has been with Florida Business Exchange since 2011 as a business intermediary operating under Terry Sherman Stallworth, PA. She's a member of the Business Brokers of Florida and the International Business Brokers Association, through whom she is designated a certified business intermediary. She specializes in the sales of Main Street businesses and has sold a host of businesses across the state of Florida. Terry has been the recipient of the BBF Million Dollar Plus Award and the IBBA Outstanding Producer Award. She is ready to help you mind your business today. So, with that, Terry, take it away.
Well, thank you for your kind words, first of all. That was very sweet. So thank you both. I'm also your biggest cheerleader too. So let's just put that out there. They did not pay me for that. But I'm sure you all share the same sentiments that I do. So I am going to do a screen share just to give us a little bit of framing here. And we'll see if I can get this to cooperate with me. Okay, can everybody see this?
Yes.
Okay, we're good. So I love that Renee prefaced this presentation by saying this is just for informational purposes. This is in no way to say that this is the best exit for you individually, but I do agree with Rosalind that not many people are having this conversation, and they're not, if they are having it, it tends to be a little bit later than maybe it should be to help you really be proactive in your preparation. So I also want you to really benefit from this as an audience. So please feel free to jump in, ask questions if I touch on something, because that way it can be a little bit more engaging as well. So I really want to focus from the outset on ways to really help you focus on your business first. And then toward the end, we can talk about the other side of the coin where perhaps you can leverage acquiring someone else's business to help you scale your particular business. So when we think about what's happening, in our economy, Renee shared those stats about 49% less money circulating in the retail space due to economic factors. We know that that's a very real thing. We all are business owners here, so we're all feeling it on in some way or another. I know for me, we're in the trust tree, so I will start by saying it was a slow quarter first quarter for me as well, which was a little unnerving. But I think that's the beauty in entrepreneurship is that we are resilient people, maybe crazy, but also very resilient, and so we push through. So I think a natural question to ask is, well, how can I really focus on my business in this time? And so I like to talk about just three primary, what we call value boosters or value builders that every business owner, whether you're the solopreneur or whether you are the business owner that has employees, can focus on. And so, first of all, I say focus on profitability. Okay. Now, um, I just left a board meeting before this, and we were talking about our organization's fiscal year that just ended. It's kind of an odd year. And even our operating expenses are up. I think it was like almost 22%. And so everyone is feeling this. What I like to share in times like this, especially as we hear rumblings of, oh, is there going to be a recession? Is there not? During downturns, if you can just focus on stability, that's a plus. So when things are down, growth may not be possible in the way that it was maybe years before, right? So as business owners, we're like, can we improve um, our profits by 5 to 7% year over year? Like if you can just do that, that's fantastic. But in down times, that may not be the thing. But if you can focus on remaining steady, that's equivalent to growth in downtime. So I want to make sure to share that. The reason that I say focus on profitability, though, is because when I sit down with a business owner to talk about valuation, right? There are times that I see fantastic top line revenue, but they're showing a loss or they're showing very, very narrow profit. And that becomes problematic for your return, primarily because without getting too weedy, as a buyer, naturally they're looking for their return on an investment, their ROI, which we all think about when we're making, I guess, what we will call investments in air quotes. By the way, I do not consider buying a business an investment. That's a different conversation, but I'm using investment loosely for this purpose. So if I have, a business that maybe has $1 million in top line revenue, but they're only netting after adjustments, $30,000, $40,000, it's hard to get a higher valuation for that because the return for round numbers a $500,000 price tag, it would take them a very long time to see that investment back, right? And so that's why you have to think about, yes, focus on your top line revenue, but really hone in on ways to increase and improve that profitability as well. So that could be trying to streamline expenses, especially again in a time like this. Maybe once or twice a year, you call your service providers and see if you can shop rates. It's not something that we necessarily enjoy doing, but sometimes there's a benefit to doing that, right? Looking at costs, right? Are my cost of goods consistent year over year on my P&L? If you are a food business, for instance, I'm talking to you from Jacksonville, Florida, by the way. So we have a couple of restaurants here locally that are known for having these Bible-like food menus. All of those items are not selling, right? Probably 20% of that menu is really what's selling. So maybe that causes them to pivot and scale down that menu to the things that really have, again, high profit margins, and is not causing them, I guess is the way to say it, to buy all these ingredients that they're probably using once a week, right? So things like that. Really looking at your service offerings and figuring out where the bulk of your revenue is being generated from. Number two, if you have a business that has employees, really investing in those key employees. And when I say investing, obviously there's a lot of focus on retention for employees, and that's been, in my opinion, since the pandemic, right? It's been a little bit more difficult. But if you have really skilled employees, delegate to them, right? That's the buzzword, and especially with the DPI conversation, we're all about learning to delegate, myself included. I will put myself on Front Street, right? But there's really something to that, because when you think about an exit through a sale, you want that transition to be as seamless as possible to the new owner. So the less that I, as the owner, and in the captain seat and doing everything in the business, the better off it is. Okay. So really, really looking to invest in those key employees. And then third, to be able to really create good systems and processes. Systems win. And so when you implement these things, and especially if they are well documented, and when I say well documented, if you're like me and trying to catch up with being in 2025 and using apps and things to really help us with these process documentations, right? That's not all of our strengths. So even if it is documented, on paper, have it somewhere. Okay. What is your onboarding process for new hires? What is your intake process for new customers and new clients? How often are you doing inventory? How are you doing inventory? All of these things. How often, even this has come up in a couple meetings recently that I've had with some buyers and sellers. How often are you even doing price increases? I have one customer right now who just did a price increase for the first time in, I want to say, like 5 years. That's a huge missed opportunity, right? So these well documented processes and operations really help attract buyers that see your business as being viable, but not only viable, further scalable. When you think about it, and I get this question posed a lot, especially for those to whom this is a new concept, right? Buying a business. There's this assumption that, well, if someone's selling a business, it must be failing. And that's not accurate at all. We think about what drives a business sale. Well, life, right? Partnership dissolution, burnout, just regular old retirement, sometimes health, unfortunately, or divorce or some life change moves these things or moves people to entertain selling a business. It doesn't mean the business is failing in some way. Sometimes it is, but not always. So when you think about that, how can you position yourself in the eyes of the person coming in to say, this is a viable business and one that I can further scale? That's the whole point of someone buying a business, is to grow what's already there. Okay. So when we think about that, going back to the drivers of the business exit, we want to think about emotional readiness. The start of the call, yes, there was a comment about it's your baby. So to take something from inception to full, you know, in implementation, and it's growing and you're growing with it. Anyone who's been able to withstand the last 10, 15 years in business, my hat certainly goes off to you, because we've also had all these world challenges that, well, who saw that on the bingo card, right? So there's true, literal blood, sweat, and tears in some cases, right, for business owners. So there is that concern of, am I really ready to sell? My take, you may never be emotionally ready to sell. I have absolutely had sellers get teary at the closing table. It is a thing. I try to prepare sellers for that, but I also like to ask the question when I meet the business owner who's thinking about selling, well, what are you going to do after? You have to think about that from the beginning, right? We all have the next chapter. So if it's that you want to retire and go spend time with the grandkids, you have something to look forward to and to do right afterwards. If you frankly want to start a new business in a different direction, I have a customer now who is selling a business to actually go back to school and do something that she always wanted to do. And she's in her late 40s, right? So, whatever the next chapter looks like, you think about those things. And sometimes that helps allay some of that emotional tie. But I will tell you this, I do feel that if you are still excited about your business, even if you're thinking about selling and you're like, I don't really, have the desire to leave it, I just think maybe someone could take the ball a little bit further down the field. That's actually a wonderful thing, because that will resonate with your potential buyers. If you are excited about your business still, it's not a pain and you hate going to work every day, that will resonate with people. And I think that enthusiasm will also help drive interest. So that's not a bad thing if you feel you're not emotionally ready. So I put here that the perfect moment rarely exists. In my mind, it never exists. There's no such thing as the perfect business, the perfect buyer, or the perfect time, right? It's just you try to get the bulk. It's that 80-20 rule that we talk about maybe in relationships. Think about it like a relationship. Take the 80, right? And see if you can live with the 20 that you don't. have. So also think about your financial indicators. So usually when I do these presentations, somebody will ask, when's the best time to sell? And they'll laugh at my answer. And even though I am being a little bit coy, I mean it. The day you wake up and you're making more money than you've ever made in your business, start thinking about it, right? And I say that because if you look at that bell curve that we're all familiar with from school, you line any business up with it. Everything that goes up at some point is going to come down. It's just what it is. So strike while the numbers are strong for sure.
Terry,
Yes,
Terry, we do have a question. Lisa has her hand raised, and this is
sure.
informal. If you
Yes.
have questions, feel free to ask
I
your
wasn't
question.
sure
Yes.
if there was and it's hot on the press right now.
Okay.
I was just speaking to a colleague of mine, HR consultant as well, whose number I'm going to make sure I give yours to.
Thank you.
And she just made the decision on Monday to wind things down, right? And
Yes.
she's contacting me to find out what are my services. Maybe there's a segue somehow, support
Yes.
her clients in some way. And my question is, do you help? Because she doesn't know what that looks like, right?
Mhm.
Do you help businesses make that determination, right? What feels right? What part of it do I want to get rid of? What part of it do I want to keep?
Yes.
Do you just sell the whole? Is your model or any mix of that? That's my question.
That's actually a fantastic question. So if there are scenarios where we call it a carve out, there's some portion of the business that the seller wants to retain, we talk through those scenarios, right? So for instance, let me think of one recently where that happened. I'm going to go back to a food business because it's the one that comes to mind first. Take a restaurant, for instance, and they are a full service restaurant and they want to sell. But this actually happened. The seller had a catering business within the restaurant, but that she ran solely, right? Like she had her own accounts, she ran it through the kitchen of the restaurant. She wanted to retain that. So my comment on that is, well, we look at the value. If the numbers are all together, right? Let's separate out from the top line revenue what you're generating from what you want to keep. Then let's see if it makes financial sense, right? First of all,
Right.
if it does, by all means, as long as your buyer is comfortable and okay with that and doesn't feel like it's going to infringe or compete with them unfairly, absolutely it can work. I even had a question about that recently. It's another food related business, but they have a very strong e-commerce national shipping piece of the business. And they were like, well, we don't want to include that. But I had to back them into that. How much of the revenue that we've shown for this valuation is attached to that? So I just think it becomes a matter of, does it make financial sense? But if so, absolutely, there are situations where that can be carved out. So again, I think that's where the strategy piece comes in, to really analyze the numbers first, talk about what the seller really desires from a best case scenario for themselves and for a potential buyer, and then to really talk through, well, here's what I see on the market, here's what I see as maybe points of concern, so how could we address those?
Right. Thank you.
My pleasure. And then again, I touched on this already, but if the enthusiasm really does matter. If you're the business owner who is exhausted and over life and over everything, I guarantee you it's going to come through in these buyer seller meetings, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So think about when those things align, right? Am I still excited about my business? Am I able to show a year over year increase, or again, that year over year stability for the last 3 or 4 years? What's next for me? When those things begin to line up, time to start planning and talking about a potential exit for sure. All right. So then, what is
I have
that?
a question.
Please, yes.
Yes, I had a question regarding the financial. I'm on the accounting financial side. My
Okay.
question is that how do you work with them when you're trying to explain to them this is the amount that you're going to get versus, I guess I'm relating to more of the gains or the losses if they sell the business. How do you focus on that part?
So that is not my wheelhouse. Are you an accountant or a CPA?
Yes, I'm an enrolled agent.
So you know what I do? I refer them to you.
Okay. Okay.
So you actually, may I ask your name?
Lily Anthony, and I apologize for the camera. I have
Oh,
the Frontier cable people here today. My
you
box
are
went out
quite all
yesterday.
right. Did I hear it was Lily?
Yes, Lily
Okay,
Anthony.
Lily. Lily, I'm glad you actually brought that up because I will say this should be a collaborative process.
Okay.
Okay.
Mhm.
And I say that for all of you business owners. I was speaking recently. I'll use this as a pretty bad example, but an example nonetheless. I was speaking recently and I was waiting for the event to start, just kind of minding my business. And no pun intended, I heard this gentleman talking and he happened to be a financial advisor. And someone asked him what he did. And he's like, oh, I do valuations. And he starts just really talking badly about us as business brokers. I just don't
Oh.
understand why they don't advise their clients. Da, 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 da. So I took it upon myself to very tactfully add that into my presentation on the fly
Okay.
because he was right. It's not our role, right?
Mhm.
So everyone has a role. It's a team. It should be.
Mhm.
So what my role is to help you determine the opinion of value, first of all, and then to help be the coach to basically run the plays from the beginning of taking the listing to market all the way to the closing table of what needs to happen, when, and how it should go down. Outside of that, though, absolutely, I tell my sellers after I do an opinion of value for someone, my next comment, especially if they're looking to go to market, is before we do that, go back now, talk to your attorney, figure out the best structure for the sale based on your financials. Go talk to your CPA, ask about any potential tax implications if you sell for X. And then the
Mhm.
B part of that question should be, are there any ways to mitigate those taxes and see if they have any
Right.
insight on ways to do
Mhm.
that? Okay. And then see if you do have a financial planner or a financial advisor, yes, consult with them too, because this is a major cash event. So if your CPA says, well, yes, you can do A, B, or C to mitigate some taxes, if there is a time constraint on setting up some kind of vehicle for those proceeds when you receive them, you want to have
Mhm.
enough time to set that up, right? So my
Right.
point is,
Exactly. Mhm.
when you are enlisting someone to help you, especially as the intermediary role, the business broker role, you want to ask those things, right? Because again, it should be a collaborative process because everybody has their piece of the puzzle to help you get to that exit. Because for a lot of us, this is our retirement. That major cash event is the retirement. You're cashing out upon your sale of the business. And so you want to make sure those things are in place. So that's actually a wonderful question that you asked, and I'm glad that you did because you have a key role in a process like this for a business owner by far.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks.
You are welcome. Any other questions on that? That was a great question. All right. Well, since we're talking about CPAs and accountants, let's talk about essential documentation. Okay. So I like to start off by saying our friends at the SBA, you hear a lot about the SBA loans for people buying businesses. If you've not heard of that, I'll quickly take a sidebar. So to start, here in Florida, most of our deals, believe it or not, are seller financed, have no third party bank financing. Okay. But when they do have third party bank financing, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be an SBA loan. And the SBA has two primary products for business acquisition, a 7A and a 504. We won't have to get into all of that, but if you hear those terms, now you'll know why you're hearing it. So the 7A loan is the primary one used for business acquisition. Now, our friends at the bank, those lenders that are using the SBA funds, love 3 years. They want to see a 3-year historical look back. So we too try to run parallel to them so that we have what we need should that be enlisted. But it also gives a buyer a good glimpse. Now you will have the occasional buyer who's like, well, I want to see 5 years or 6 years. To me, if they're in due diligence and they're asking for it, for sure they have the right to ask for it. 3 years though is more than fair to see financial trends. So with that, 3 years of your business tax returns. The other reason this comes up, and I'm actually dealing with it this week with a customer, when you're using one of the SBA loans, federal funds, you can imagine it's very invasive. So the closer on the loan committee, loan team, will actually also request a transcript directly from the IRS. Lily can probably tell you all about that too, right? They'll have you sign this 8821 to say that you authorize them to pull tax return transcripts directly from the IRS to make sure that it matches with what was submitted in underwriting. Now, you can imagine there's always that, bad apple. Someone somewhere probably altered some tax returns, right? And so that's the whole premise for pulling the tax transcripts. But my point is, the more organized you are from the outset, that process, which can become a lot if you are not organized, becomes much less. It's a lot easier to get through because you're prepared and you have what you need together. So in harmony with those 3 years of tax returns, we also like to see 3 years of P&Ls and balance sheets. And on occasion, I will have a seller who's like, well, I got a P&L, but I don't really have a balance sheet. It's not that accurate. But we want those things because on the balance sheet is going to show outstanding liability. That way we know how to prepare for that if that has to be addressed. And really is going to show the true health of the company or the business. Lisa?
I love questions. Get
Please.
used to it. So two things, asset documentation, right? I know that there's the physical assets, right, of the business,
Yes.
but we have things like trademarks and copyrights and all the things,
Yes.
those would be part of that asset documentation. Do you have a list of what those assets are? Because, I have my list,
Absolutely.
but I might not be thinking of other
Yes.
things.
Exactly. So those are part of the questions that I would be asking in my initial discovery call.
Okay.
And it's funny that you mentioned that. I actually, at the SBDC conference where I initially met Rosalind, the one last year, I actually met two fantastic attorneys. They have founded a practice that's specifically geared towards IP, intellectual property for
Right.
business owners.
Mhm.
So they were here speaking at our board lunch just last week, and they are actually offering a service to run those marks because you want to have your registration number is the biggest thing when you have trademarks. And again, we won't get too weedy with that, but
Yeah.
that's what you want to have. But for a long time, I've been doing this, June will be 14 years. For a long time, I never saw intellectual property come up. My background is in the music business though, and so that was a very big deal over there. I've seen horror stories of people having to change names because they did not secure their IP, but I got into this business and I really didn't see it. Not so much now. I'm seeing it more and more, which is actually very exciting that small business owners are securing that intellectual property earlier on. But now, Lisa, you raise a great point because it is a transferable asset. It's intangible, but it has to be transferred, and it has to be transferred properly.
Right.
So now we have practices like their name is Secure Mark Legal, who will run the searches for us, make sure that we can loop them in early on in due diligence to make sure, okay, these are the associated marks. And not to get too weedy, depending on how those marks are owned, meaning does Terry own it individually?
Yeah.
Or does the entity
business,
own it?
yeah,
That's
the
exactly
entity.
right. All of those things come into play.
Yeah.
So absolutely, that should be included on the asset list. Now, quick tangent, I will say, I've had questions about, well, how do you value that? IP, especially on what we call Main Street, is still very subjective. So, it's hard to affix a true value to it as a standalone piece, right? If someone was like, well, I'm going to keep my business, but I'm going to sell my logo or my slogan, not really much value there in most cases.
Right.
But absolutely, when you package it with the business, very important. So absolutely, that should be on the asset list.
Thank you.
Yes, you're
So,
welcome.
Terry, I have a question
Mhm.
because you talked about balance sheet, outstanding liabilities, and the factoring of that.
Mhm.
For myself, during COVID, I took
Yes.
EIDL funds. Is that something that can be transferred to the seller,
Mm.
or is that something that has to be paid off before I'm able to move to the next step of moving my business to a seller? I
That's
mean,
a
to a
fantastic
buyer?
question too. So the technical answer is yes, wink, wink, it could be transferred. However, we structure most of our sales here as what we call asset sales. And that means, as an example, Terry LLC owns Joe's Coffee, right? And I'm selling all of the assets and the fictitious name Joe's Coffee to Renee LLC. So Renee is not buying Terry LLC or my EIN. She has to have her own, but I am transferring my assets to her LLC or corporation so that she can continue doing business as Joe's Coffee public facing. Does that make sense for everyone so far? Okay.
Yes.
When I transfer those assets to Renee LLC, she is assuming she's getting those, and as she should, free and clear, right? So that means I am responsible as an asset sales structure for paying off any outstanding liabilities at the time of closing. Otherwise, I can't sell my assets because they're encumbered, they're liened. So
Mm,
take, for example, the EIDL loan, which is a fantastic example. Technically, that loan was the only one that came out under the CARES Act that can be transferred to someone. The catch is, though, the original guarantor has to stay on the hook. So you think about it, why would I do that? Right? Because
right.
now I'm on the hook. I like Renee. I hope that she'll keep making the payments, but if she doesn't, I, I'm on the hook for it still. So she could just say, well, I'm done with this. But now I've got to come back. So the best bet, I'm telling people, just pay it off. It's just not worth the assignment and the risk in my mind. That's my opinion, but not
Okay.
worth it. Other liabilities, though, fleets of vehicles. I just listed a printing company, for instance. They have some printers that they bought recently that they are financing, things like that. If you were to negotiate it with the buyer to say, hey, just assume the payments on it, some buyers are open to it, but it's very rare because they know going in, it's an asset sale. All of this should be free and clear. So, again, this is where the planning comes in because, as you can imagine, I have had some very unfortunate conversations in recent months where someone wants to sell, but frankly, they owe more in even the EIDL loan alone than the business is worth. So they can't. It doesn't make sense. So again, that's why the planning is super important. And one more thing I will add about the EIDL loan, because I find that a lot of people don't realize this. The monies were moving so fast at that time, naturally, and they needed to. They were just deploying money. And so a lot of people thought there was like no strings attached. Well, what most people didn't realize is later on, they went back and they leaned your assets. You probably don't remember if you got an EIDL loan, but you would have had to submit an asset list at some point. And those are the assets that are liened, which means you again cannot sell the business if there's a lien outstanding on your assets. Now, I will say I've had some situations where a business owner has an EIDL loan. Maybe they have two locations for the business, they're selling off one. And I would say, hey, call your lender, let them know what you're trying to do. And if they're reasonable, I've seen some cases where they will release the lien on the location you're selling and attach it to the one you're keeping. So they just keep making the payments. So there are scenarios where I think that department is, I'm saying, hopefully becoming a little bit more reasonable and willing to work with business owners. So again, you just kind of have to face the conversation head on and try to figure out solutions for things that are just going to be stuck with us for a little while.
Okay. Perfect. Awesome. Thank you.
You are welcome. So again, with that asset documentation, that is why it's so important. Now, one more sidebar to the sidebar when it comes to your balance sheet. obviously, if you got a really good accountant, they're usually trying to help you depreciate your tangible assets, maybe sometimes a little bit, more quickly. So that can become a piece as well for a major tax event. Lily can speak more to that as well. I don't want to speak outside of my wheelhouse, but we have seen cases where the assets of the seller were depreciated significantly, but then towards the end, when the asset allocation comes into play, they want maybe a little bit higher value for it. And now they're having to pay on the gain, right? So, or the buyer wants, for example, to increase the value of the tangible asset so that they can start the depreciation over again. So, again, all of these are reasons why you want to have as many conversations with your collective team as possible before going to market. Okay. And then lastly, something that sometimes gets missed is the need for the lease agreements. And I mean the lease agreement for your physical space, if you're a brick and mortar business or have an office space, but also if you have any lease agreements for equipment, vehicles, again, things like that. Because sometimes there's terminology in there going back to the liabilities question of maybe they cannot be assumed by someone. So we want to know that from the outset. But the lease agreement for the actual space can absolutely become an inhibitor to a successful exit if the language in it is wrong and you just happen to have a very difficult landlord, which is something that I feel like I'm encountering more often than not lately. So again, I will also say this as a word of advice. If you are maybe a home-based business or someone who has not yet moved into a physical location to lease a space, please get the proper help when you're negotiating your lease. Don't call your friend, and not to diminish anyone, but don't call the friend who does residential real estate. That's not the person to help you with a commercial lease. There's all kinds of tricky language that can get put in there that I'm telling you will become a real problem when you're ready to exit. If everything's moving beautifully and the landlord says, nope, I'm not assigning the lease, you can't sell. Okay, so please make sure you do that properly. Yes, Lisa.
I just wanted to add this for Renee, Rosalind, for yourself. Here in the cities of Pembroke Pines and Miramar, they even encourage potential business owners that are going to be leasing space in their communities to bring those leases to the city manager's office, to the I forget the name of the code enforcement people and all the
Yes.
things, so that they can help make sure that they can actually get that done, so that there's no problem opening up with the COI
Oh, that's
there.
a
So I wanted to
beautiful
share that
service.
because I know Renee and Rosalind, they work with a lot of business owners here in this community. So let them know that that could get them out of a lot of delays in opening and stuff like that. So I
Absolutely.
wanted to share that since it was.
No, thank you for sharing that because that is huge.
That
That
is.
is huge. I mean, some of these leases, it's it should be criminal on some level, what they stick in here, and you don't know what you don't know. It's not your job to understand all this legal jargon that goes in these leases, but find someone to help you with that, because I've definitely seen it inhibit a successful sale for sure. All right, Renee, did you have something?
No, 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 no. I was just
Okay.
like, this is just such, it's really great information. It
Well,
really
I'm
is.
I'm glad. I'm glad. So here's a little bit about the process, if you will, okay, of selling. And it'll be very high level, but give you a little bit to think about. So when you think about this, our ultimate goal is to protect the goodwill of your business because your job is to keep running the business as though nothing is happening, okay, when it's being taken to market. You don't want your employees to know. Frankly, you don't want your landlord to know, in my mind, until they need to, for reasons that we just alluded to. Your vendors, things like that, because naturally people hear change is coming, and we don't always handle that well, even if it's not really going to affect us. So we really hold that as the cornerstone of this transition process. So most people that I talk to, will say, well, I've sold property before, I've bought and sold a house. I'm like, that's great. This is nothing like that. Just dismiss everything you think you know about this process. It's not quite the same. So when you think about um, buying real estate. I know my husband and I bought a home in December. I could not tell you who the people were if they were standing in front of me. Never saw them. The only reason I know their name is because it was obviously on the paperwork, but we're still getting their mail. So that's why we know their names. Okay. But outside of that, we don't know who they are and they don't know who we are. This is not that. Okay. It's very important that you understand who's across the literal or figurative table from you, right? Because again, you've built this business. You most likely care about your employees, you care about your customers and your clients, and you want to make sure that your legacy is going to be upheld, right? Your company morale is going to be left intact after you're gone. People are going to be taken care of. And so you will meet your buyer very early on. And I tell my sellers, it sounds a little bit hokey, but I'll kind of point at my stomach. I'm like, you'll just kind of know when it's not a good fit. And they chuckle, and then we'll have a meeting. And sure enough, they're like, oh, that's not the person. I'm like, you just kind of know, right? And so I like to tell my sellers, as much as it's a discovery meeting, if you will, for the buyer with you when the time is appropriate, they're asking you a lot of questions about your background, how you built the business, what opportunities do you foresee, what problems and pain points do you have. You should be equally asking these sort of interview questions of them as well. What are your plans? Why do you have an interest in this particular business? What's your background? What are your strengths? Because again, that helps you to understand who you're about to go into business with. Because ultimately, although this is a transactional situation, with all offers, there's an included training and transition period after closing, usually 2 to 4 weeks. Sometimes they can negotiate like a consulting rate with you as a seller to stay on longer. You want to feel like I've got good synergy with this person. Going back to the example of Joe's Coffee, right? I want to know that I like Renee. I feel like she's a good fit for this company. I don't mind working with her, and I really want to see her succeed. And I feel like she's genuinely excited to take on what I've built and grow it further. So you want to have that feeling. I had a seller tell me a few years ago, and I've adopted this kind of mentality. He says, Terry, to me, a good deal is where everyone leaves the closing table and feels like they lost something. And I chuckled when he said it. But when I thought about it, he's exactly right, right? When one side leaves the table feeling like they got over on, it's not good. But this is definitely a dance, okay? This selling process. So if everyone has to give up a little something to make it work, that's a good deal. And I do think he's right in that attitude. So going back to the sort of interview process, ask the tough questions. There, I guarantee you, as a buyer, they're going to ask you, "Why are you selling?" And depending on your reason, that could be a tough question, right? Because it may require you to be a little bit vulnerable. So you want to make sure you're aligned, not only from a company culture, but even from just who you are as two people, right? Going into business in some level together. And then you think about these employee provisions. The goal is to really protect your employees. So I've had some sellers who feel like they're being dishonest and not telling their employees what's happening from the onset. I let the seller make that determination. You know your team, you understand your team. So if you want to tell them from the beginning what's happening, we can do that. But let's try to manage how we do that, because we don't want them running, right? And we don't really want them talking a whole lot. They're going to talk, but we don't want them to scare off your customers and your clients either. So let's try to do some mood management, okay, when we go to do that. And then there are other cases where the employees are finding out the day of closing. In most cases, that is the case, but there again are ways to do that. So when you think about that training and transition period, if my employees and customers see me at Joe's Coffee, who they've known for 10 years, and now Renee's behind the counter with me, and I'm saying, oh, this is Renee, she's going to help us grow the business further. After that 2 to 4 weeks is over and they love Renee, they've forgotten about me. So by the time I'm gone, they're not even thinking about me, right? They love Renee now. So there again are ways to handle that. And that's really what our goal is, to help with that as well.
Terry, let me ask a question because I know
Mhm.
we're winding down on time, but I this question is on my mind. How long is the selling process? What does that
That's
normally look like?
a good question. Typically, and I say in normal times, 5 to 7 months you can bank on. Okay. Now, obviously, some deals sell a lot slower. Some go a lot faster, depending on the business, the positioning, the location, things of that sort. But I try to prepare people 5 to 7 months at least. Okay. So, unlike real estate, again, where most times 30, 45 days, you're nervous because your listing is stale, so to speak. It's not the case here. To really start getting momentum, usually that timeline.
I
Okay.
would I would also add to that, like that's the actual process of the transaction. When you look
Correct.
at what we gave as the value boosters, you need to give yourself 3 to 4 years to get those strong financials, to work with DPI. No, I just had to throw that in. To be able to get that profit stability in, right? That takes time.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. And so we
And
talk about that. I'm
Oh,
sorry, go ahead, Renee.
no, 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 no. I want to make sure if you have questions, now is the time to ask them. We were going to have a Q&A, but it's kind of
Yes,
been just organically taking place. Thank you, Lisa, for leading the charge
yes.
that way. So please, because we only have about 3 minutes left of your
Okay,
presentation, Terry. So I just want to make sure if anybody has any questions, please just
sure.
chime in.
Please jump in there. All right, well, I'll talk about these quick exit planning mistakes so that you can keep this in mind too. Your timing is everything. So, what I see oftentimes is if people haven't properly prepared, there's not enough time, like on their lease, for instance, to make it make sense for a transfer. Or there are other factors that are coming, right? So, the timing and what Rosalind alluded to in terms of really preparing 3 to 5 years ahead of time is fantastic. Um, Sometimes without having proper timing too, they're making decisions that are forced, right? There's some unexpected event that causes them to make this hasty decision. And then sometimes they're also deciding on a deal based on desperation, and it never ends well. I had this happen recently, and the business was sold in February. The buyers are already on market, not even 2 months, right? But the seller really made, in my mind, a very hasty move because he had to. And then here we are. Disorganized records, again, that definitely impacts your value from a buyer's perspective because you don't have proper documentation. They can't prove to themselves that the business is what you say it is. And then we talked about already those liability surprises, right? Loans, things that are outstanding that maybe you weren't aware of how they would impact the sale. Those can really be costly. So we talked about timeline just now. Here's a quick little kind of timeline to help you envision what this looks like. So 2 to 3 years ahead of time to start planning if possible, at minimum, we'll say. Really digging into building those financials 12 to 24 months out, strengthening your team, buyer search, 5 to 7 months, maybe 6 to 12, somewhere in there, and then a full transition 3 to 6 months post close. Okay. So begin now. Okay. Start with the end in mind. Assemble your team. We talked about the CPA, the business attorney, the business intermediary, your business coaches or consultants, your financial advisor, and document everything. Okay. Document as much as you can. So the best exits, as I say here, combine preparation with the right timing, with the right buyer at the right terms. So that's our goal. And with that, any questions? I'll also throw my contact info up here too, just so you guys can have it again. I've got a little QR code here.
Thank you so much, Terry. That was so
You are
good.
That was
welcome.
I know
excellent.
Yeah,
it might have been a lot of information to absorb. It's maybe something that, my baby is what we're 5 years old. And so you're thinking like, oh, I've got plenty of time. But man, when you
right.
think about
It
what
goes
age,
fast.
yeah, it goes fast. And that's why we asked that question in the beginning, like, how old are you going to be in 5 years? And it's like,
Yes.
man, to think about, we're going to be close to 60. Yeah, we don't want to be working forever.
Let's put it
For
this
sure.
way. You and Rosalind are going to be my age in 5 years. Let's put that out there. Okay. Bing.
Well, you ladies look fantastic. I'm gonna assume that you're
I
all
know.
going to
That's why I
see
love to say
Ida.
it.
Right? I see what's happening here. Okay, I'm going to.
And I feel that we wanted to destigmatize what selling a business can look like. I feel it's like, reading Revelations in the Bible. Like it's the one chapter no one wants to read, right? You
Yeah.
don't want to talk about the end, but I think we want you to be able to be confident. And obviously there is the other part of, some of us might be financially ready to acquire a new business. I know like in Renee's industry, buying a book of business is very normal in regards to insurance. So you can look at it from both ways. I think, listen, all of us here are part of the DPI community. And Terry, this was phenomenal in helping our business owners just reframe and really think about, what do I want to do next? Yeah.
For sure.
I'm gonna
That's just a lot
definitely
of
get your
information. Very
information
good.
to my colleague that I spoke to today.
Thank you.
I didn't even think to invite her because I forgot this was happening. So well done.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I'm going to put back up the contact information for Terry. Terry is very warm to talk to. I think when you think about an industry where we want to see representation, I think Terry is in a very kind of male-dominated industry, and then she brings that warmth, but that expertise, and she lets you know what someone else might not tell you in regards to something that is so intimate and so
Personal, yeah.
personal. Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you. No,
Yeah.
thank you all for having me for sure. And thank you so much for engaging with me also.
Oh,
That
yes,
makes it
definitely.
a lot easier.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah,
It
thanks,
does.
Terry. Appreciate it.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
I'll definitely connect.
Please do.
Oh,
And
me
I
too.
mean that
Lily is
sincerely.
definitely going to connect with you.
Any
Mhm.
questions, please feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to chat.
You might regret saying that to me.
Hey, you don't worry about the questions. You come right on with it, Lisa.
Yeah. So what I can do is also do, like, if you need me to, we can do a email, not introduction, right? This is family. We're all here. But
I'm already connecting with her on LinkedIn.
okay, well, I know you're so good, but Lily, if you want me to, give
Okay,
you
that would be
email.
perfect. And Lisa, it was good to see you again. Thank you.
Likewise.
Yes.
Likewise.
Yeah. So let us just tell you next month we have a strategic mastermind. And if you are not, part of our wheelhouse in regards to being our active clients, you are able to join us. It is going to be a paid registration, June 24th. Listen, the market has shifted. We know it. And you might be thinking, what do I need to do next? We want to let you know, we want to talk about it. We normally only do this at the end of the year, but man, there's so much that is happening, legislation and tariffs, and not sure, the contraction of sales that we know is on the horizon. So if that is you and you're feeling, man, I need to really know what to do next. For obviously with our business owners that we have as clients, we're actively always talking about this. I think one thing that I will say, and I know all of you mostly have done reviews for us. I want to say next month we are going to be specifically talking about how you can decrease expenses. A lot of times we want to look at growing online sales. If you grow your sales, let's say $10,000 in a month, that's great, but then there's a cost to it, right? Your cost of goods sold. So maybe you're only contributing 3,000 or 4,000 of that to your bottom line profit. Whereas if you cut your expenses 10,000, that goes immediately to your profit. So when we talk about that stability, that is something that we want you to start focusing on, those expenses versus just top line sales. And that's going to help with that stabilization. But I think with that, we are going to have to go. Thank you, Terry, so much. Thank you all for being engaged in this conversation. We appreciate you being on with us. And yeah, it's almost 3:00, top of the hour. So have a wonderful rest of the afternoon.
You
You
all
too.
too.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Have a
Right.
wonderful
Bye,
day.
everyone.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.